So kia ora, I'm Daellenbach, and I'm one of the lecturers in the Bachelor of Midwifery program at Ara Institute of Canterbury.
And I'm Lorna Davies. I'm an academic manager for health practice department, but I was for a long time a lecturer on the Bachelor of Midwifery program.
Okay, so the Ara Midwifery program is a blended learning program with students all around the upper half of the South Island. And as much as possible, we want the program to enable them to study where they live, where they will also then become midwives, hopefully in the future, and have connections to those communities. So a lot of the theory is taught online, and they do most of their practice placements in their own areas. And at the kind of central hub of the program, we have akana, or small tutorial groups, with a kayako, or a clinical lecturer in each of the areas where we deliver the program. And they meet weekly with that group of students and kind of provide that face-to-face debriefing, teaching practice skills, support for students in the program. The most of us are based in Christchurch, but we have staff that are out in satellite areas as well. So like currently Nelson Marlborough, South Canterbury, sometimes we have someone on the West Coast as well.
We were introduced to to OB3 at a conference in 2012, and immediately saw the benefits of using it. And we initiated a pilot in 2012 and rolled it out wholesale for the program the following year in 2013. The reason we were so keen to use OB3 was that we had had problems with the software that we were using previously to that. Firstly, it had become almost obsolete, but also we wanted something that was really interactive. We carried out some research, and one of the major findings was that the students found it extremely limiting in as much as there was no connection, no interaction. And we realized that we really had to find something that filled that gap, and OB3 filled that need really, really well.
Yeah, so with the first online materials that we put together, they were really comprehensive in terms of trying to cover all the things that we felt that students needed to know. And yes, we had sort of forums for students to post discussions, but they didn't really use them very effectively. So we were attracted to OB3 because we saw a way that in that could, strengthen learning through that learner to learner connection, with students being able to post comments and discuss with each other in a much more flexible and targeted way than when you have a discussion forum that's separate from the content itself. And then as we became more familiar with using it, we were able to kind of step back and let the students do a lot more of the knowledge content creation, and that we could take more of a position as like the curators of knowledge. So pointing out the things that were important to know, maybe getting them to read a resource, but then the students putting up what they consider to be the main points of it.
I also think it's changed the way that we run our online tutorials as well, because instead they changed from being a lecture style to being a focus on the issues that arose for the students in their discussions on OB3 during the week. So it became much more student focused in that way.
And in a way, what we're doing with OB3 is like a flipped classroom. They do their work online, and then, whenever they want, asynchronously discussing, posting up content for each other. And then in the week, we have then the hour and a half online Zoom tutorial where, yeah, we can then discuss the content that they've already worked through.
So it takes it to another level.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of usability, you touched on something, because it's so easy to use. And the fact that we can actually introduce first year students to OB3 and they can run with it is testimony really to the fact that it's incredibly user friendly. And I think that saves time and builds confidence for both staff and students.
Yeah.
That was definitely an issue, and perhaps more so for the satellite students. And so using OB3 as a platform has really promoted that connectivity and made them, I feel, a much more included part of the whole online experience. And I do think the social isolation was probably the major issue. But that whole ability to actually talk to each other, the co-learning that goes on between the students, is something that we wouldn't have been able to do on any other platform. They've become co-designers of some of the materials that they use online, co-contributors. They're much more confident about sharing information, and that's a fabulous thing, that they can just direct students to things that they've seen or they've read. Then they engage in discussion around that. And certainly as a facilitator, I think it's changed our role considerably over that time.
So we still go in when we have a module as, as a course coordinator, and you respond to the kind of comments that the students have posted up. Sometimes it's prompting, asking further questions for them to consider to kind of keep the discussion going. Yeah. And the other thing is that we find students share a lot about themselves as well.
Yeah.
And they can kind of show what they already know or use their own experiences to help each other learn about, the complexity of the lives of whānau, basically.
And that's lovely, actually. That's a really big positive, yeah. So, and one particular course, the students, quite early in the program, actually, in the first year, the students create their own materials to share with their peers. And it's a history project, so they're taking an aspect of history and they're producing the materials, presenting them, initiating discussion, and dealing with the complexity that presents, which is amazing, actually. And it's just wonderful to see them fly so early on in the program. And I think it's a great confidence booster for them as well. So that's fantastic.
In midwifery history, there is so much information in books, online, all over the place. And we've just set up ways that the students can kind of put that together through using scenarios from different time periods. We put the students into groups of about 4, and they can be separated, work from their own place and put together these amazing resources, because the material is there, and we just have to give them a kind of a good shell to put that in.
Yeah.
And then they're away and they work it out for themselves. And then they comment on each other's materials, and, they love it. They're very... Instead of having the portfolios and ring binder folders where the students have to keep, all of their practice records and their signed off skill sheets and all of their reflections and their learning tools, learning outcome tools, they now put them into a portfolio folder, and that makes it much easier for their kayako or their clinical lecturer to keep up with what they're doing, give them, feedback, and it's kind of kept it all in one place. So they can do that in some pages, it's just writing directly onto the page. Other pages in OB3, they will put up, files. They use it more as a kind of a record, of their practice-based learning.
But they do it in a really interactive way again. They will include videos or links to websites or upload articles. So it's not just a practice record, it's much more than that. I think it really promotes reflection that develops into much more critical reflection as time goes on.
Yeah. And what the advantage for us is that then the students, kind of the theory content that we've developed and that they've contributed to, or that we've kind of provided an environment for them to develop themselves, and their practice portfolio are all in one platform for them with just one login, and there it is, all there for them.
Yeah.
And
project presentation as well. Thinking about continuity in the third year.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, where the individual students have their own folder where they post information about a specific practice-based topic, and then the other students come in and open up a conversation about that, and that's used for assessment purposes too. So.
Yeah. So with the portfolio, students have, and we in setting it up, have choice about which pages or which folders they share with others, and which ones are just private or even just private for themselves, or private between them and their kayako.
And I think what we've just touched on is the importance of OB3 for assessment. It's not just the learning and teaching element, it's the assessment as well.
I think that the students the importance here is that the students are learning from each other. And and students often say that the content that we put up is at one level, a higher level, but the discussion that they have amongst themselves is kind of at their level. And sometimes it's about them explaining content to each other, and sometimes it's about them talking about their interpretation. And it is in that discussion with each other that students kind of develop their understanding of their own position and how they want to craft their own philosophy. And because it's this sort of shared space, it sort of breaks down some of those hierarchies that sometimes happen between the lecturer and the student, because everyone can be there. It's kind of a really egalitarian space.
Yeah.
And and the students do really appreciate that, like the feedback from that interlearner discussion. Sometimes some students are overwhelmed because when the class is quite big, because there's so much of it. And so sometimes we have to kind of push students not to respond to everything that's on there, but just to kind of save it for the most important things. So that is sometimes a challenge, but overall, if you see students again and again.
It's quite unusual seeing over enthusiasm as a challenge, really, isn't it? It's not that common in education. So.
No, that's right. I mean, in a way, because it's this asynchronous online discussions, more students get more opportunity to say more than they would in a classroom situation.
For me, I've been an educator for, so it's rare, but for 25 years. And, we've seen this move from sage on the stage to guide on the side. And this takes us one step further into the realm of the curator of knowledge. And so it's not about what we know anymore. It's about where we know that the students can get the information that they need to keep them informed. And it's a very different skill set that's developed as a result of that. And again, I mean, OB3 just gives itself to that role as curator really, really well.
Yeah, I think that when you, because we copy them and they come across without the previous year's students' comments, but in going through, when we do that and update each year, we do often go through then and look at which kind of prompts and questions, which exercises worked, and what gaps were still left in refining the materials for the following year. So it is really helpful. Actually, the student comments give us as lecturers a lot of feedback around the content, which is really cool. So on the way our Moodle pages and their, is Ara-wide standards are set up, is that there's a front page where we put course outlines, who the lecturers are, and other documents that are separately needed for students in that course. And then there will be tabs for each of the module weeks, because our theory, we package it into modules so that not every course is always running all the time, but each week is dedicated to different courses, and so kind of working through. And so students come into those, they get the link to the appropriate OB3 page by going into the Moodle and then going to that module tab and then getting that module. I mean, once they're in OB3, of course, they've got all of the courses, but it's just as a kind of like structure guide for them, so that it keeps them on track, and it's easier for them to find what's open and ready for them to work through. And, where the lecturers or Kayako will also be, focusing and responding in that week. And then we have some of their assessments are essays that are written and they are put through Turnitin. So the Turnitin Dropbox is in the learning management system as well. And then our library has got, help access, and that's also in Moodle. So the students can kind of access those links.
Teachers come in.
Yeah, it's a portal, isn't it?
Yeah. And then they just go through that, and it takes their, identity, recognizes them as a enrolled person in the course, and they just work through it. So, if it was a Moodle book, if we use that, it would still be the students would click on it. Instead, they click on a link to OB3. It's no difference from their perspective, except that what they get in OB3 is so much more.